On this week's episode of the I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members, I'm going to talk a little bit about why you might want to consider doing strategic planning on a regular basis, however frequent that regularity is. Typically, we think it needs to be every 3 years, and that may be the case. Although the way the world changes, there may be some intermittent updates that you want to do, or maybe increase the frequency and just lessen the depth of the strategic planning. But I'm working with a number of nonprofits right now. And one of the biggest benefits I'm seeing with doing strategic planning is engaging your stakeholders. By engaging in conversation with them to collect data, to collect information, which ultimately will be fed into the strategic plan or the planning process, you have an opportunity to do some outreach and some connection that you wouldn't otherwise have. In a very formal setting like this, where we're talking to stakeholders and ask very specific questions, it gives them an opportunity to provide input that they wouldn't be able to provide on a regular basis, just because the nature of the relationship between them and you, your organization, is such that it's probably programmatic in nature. This gives them an opportunity to provide strategic input and gives you some really very good information when an independent party is asking versus you asking. So just engaging stakeholders is kind of a secret sauce to strategic planning, and doesn't take a lot of work, and it's not that difficult, but really yields some significant dividends. Number two, and somewhat a corollary to that, is engaging your staff and starting to align the staff with your thinking. Now I'm speaking to executive directors, I'm speaking to board chair, that to align the staff and to get input from the staff as well. Throughout the year, the interaction with staff is very likely operations focused, just has to be. So when you have an opportunity to really engage them in a strategic discussion and look forward to the organization, look at the strengths and weaknesses, those types of questions that are standard in strategic planning. And again, build that relationship, get buy-in, and have them swimming in the same direction, rowing in the same direction, as ultimately would be the CEO and the board. So by nature of that, working with your stakeholders, which includes the staff, you really get an opportunity to just have some engagement, get some really good ideas. Also, identifying priorities. The world changes so fast. And to identify those 2-3 priorities, goals, if you will, is what we use, the term we use in strategic planning, but just the priorities, the direction, and having the discussion about each of those really creates some interesting outcomes if done properly. And it just makes the organization better. And of course, with everybody aligned, the board, CEO, the staff, stakeholders, you really have got some power and some momentum going there. And it just really creates some clarity for everybody involved. So the very, very powerful in the strategic planning process to do that, to prioritize and identify a direction. And I tell you, something that's really started to emerge in the top, and we do this in a lot of our board retreats, but certainly in strategic planning, is to discuss the mission. And as you've heard me say before, if you ask 15 people, what does the mission mean to them, you're going to get probably 15 different answers. So from that can identify some potential gaps and give you an opportunity to provide clarity and to solidify around the mission of the organization, of which after you solidify that, then you have the goals, objectives, the typical strategic planning stuff. At the board level, you should probably stop at the goals and the objectives, and then let staff carry out with the activities and the tasks and the timelines. That's really their role, their responsibility to do. So I encourage every organization to have some form of a strategic planning process every few years. Again, you can augment that with a 1-year mini strategic planning update or strategic planning refresh. These things are not time consuming and not difficult, but really will provide the clarity that you, your stakeholders, the entire organization needs to be effective and to minimize inefficiencies. So that's my words for the day. Have some type of strategic planning process. This is Michael Corley with the I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members, and we will see you next week.